The distress signal traveled through the darkness of space for 3 years before it reached Earth. It was a desperate message, sent with the last reserves of power from a dying ship. The Assyrians had nowhere else to turn. On a quiet Tuesday morning, at the NASA Deep Space Network facility in California, Jack Miller sipped his coffee and stared at his monitor. The 33-year-old communications specialist had worked the night shift for 5 years, and nothing exciting ever happened on his watch. But today was different. "That's not normal," Jack whispered, setting down his mug. The signal pattern on his screen pulsed with a regularity that couldn't be natural. He called his supervisor, and within an hour the room filled with scientists and government officials. By sunset, the President of the United States knew. By midnight, the United Nations Security Council gathered for an emergency session. The message was clear. Intelligent alien life existed, and they needed help. The Assyrians came from a gentle world with soft purple skies and warm seas that covered most of the planet's surface. Their bodies were slender and graceful, with large eyes adapted to perpetual twilight. They had developed advanced technology but had never known war or famine or natural disasters. Their ships explored space out of curiosity, not necessity, until the Vorix arrived. The translation of the message took weeks of work by the best computers and linguists on Earth. When they finally understood it, humanity was faced with a choice that would change their destiny forever. "They're being hunted to extinction," explained Dr. Eliza Chen to the gathered world leaders. The small woman pushed her glasses up and pointed to the star charts the aliens had included. "The Vorix have already destroyed 3 star systems. The Assyrians are next." General Lisa Carter frowned at the projections. "And they're asking us for military help? What do they know about us?" "Nothing," Dr. Chen said. "They sent this message blindly to several nearby star systems. They have no idea what kind of help they're getting. Or who they're asking," added the Russian representative. Lisa nodded slowly. "They don't know they've just called the apex predators of the galaxy." In the quiet that followed, everyone in the room understood what she meant. Humans had evolved on a planet that tried to kill them every day. Extreme temperatures, natural disasters, diseases, predators, and worst of all, other humans. They had survived it all. They had developed technology specifically to hurt each other before they learned to use it for peace. Earth was classified in the old Assyrian archives as Deathworld 7 for good reason. "We should respond," the president finally said. "Humanity has dreamed of this moment. First contact." "But should we help them fight?" asked the Chinese premier. "This is not our war." Jack Miller, now part of the response team because he was first to spot the signal, spoke up from the back of the room. "If we don't help, we're letting an entire species die when we could save them. What does that say about us?" For 3 days, the nations of Earth argued. For the first time in history, they all agreed on something. The vote was unanimous. Humanity would respond. 2 months later, the USS Defender prepared for launch from the International Space Station. Captain Alan Powell stood on the bridge looking at the crew busy at their stations. He was a tall man with gray hair at his temples and eyes that had seen combat on 3 continents. Now he would lead humanity's first interstellar mission. "Captain, all systems are ready," reported his first officer, Maria Vasquez. "The new drive is stable." "Thank you, Maria." Alan turned to the 2 civilians on his bridge. "Dr. Martinez, Ms. Wright, are your teams prepared?" Dr. Greg Martinez nodded. The xenobiologist had spent the last 2 months studying the biological information included in the Assyrian message. "My team is ready, though I'm still concerned about possible contamination issues. Their biology is very different from ours." "My diplomatic team is also ready," said Samantha Wright. The veteran diplomat looked calm, but her fingers tapped nervously against her leg. "We've prepared first contact protocols based on the cultural information in their message." Alan smiled at them both. "We're making history today. The first humans to meet an alien species, and the first humans to fight an interstellar war," Maria added quietly. The journey to the coordinates took 3 weeks using the experimental drive developed from technology hinted at in the Azerian message. During that time, the crew trained constantly. The Marines practiced combat drills. The diplomats refined their greeting speeches. The scientists tested equipment for measuring alien environments. When they arrived, they found the Azerian refugees hiding in an asteroid field at the edge of their home system. Their fleet consisted of civilian ships never designed for long journeys. Many were damaged. All were overcrowded. The Azerian diplomatic vessel that approached them was beautiful, with flowing lines that reminded Alan of sea creatures from Earth. It was clearly designed for ceremony, not combat. "Open a channel," Alan ordered. "Let's say hello." The first face-to-face meeting happened in the Defenders conference room, specially prepared with lighting adjusted to Azerian comfort levels. Ambassador Zelnar entered with 2 assistants. They were smaller than humans, about 5 feet tall, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes. They moved with a grace that seemed almost like floating. Then they saw the humans and froze in terror. "What's wrong?" Samantha asked, stepping forward slowly with her hands open to show she carried no weapons. She had practiced this greeting for weeks. "Your size," Ambassador Zelnar finally said, his voice translated by the computer. "Your muscle density, the speed of your movements." He seemed to be fighting the urge to flee. "You are from the Forbidden World, the Death World." "Earth," Samantha confirmed. "We received your distress call." "We did not know," one of the assistants whispered. "The old archives warned never to contact your kind. You are classified as extremely dangerous." Alan stepped forward, and the Azerians backed away. "We're dangerous to our enemies," he said, "not to those who ask for our help." Slowly, the Azerians relaxed enough to sit down. They explained their situation in detail. The Vorex horde had appeared 5 years ago, conquering and consuming everything in their path. The Azerians had no weapons, no defenses. Their only choice was to run. "Why do the Vorex attack you?" Greg asked, fascinated by the aliens despite the grim situation. "Resources, slaves. They take what they want because no one can stop them," Zelnar explained. "Until now, perhaps." When the briefing ended, Alan stood up. "We'll need to see their fleet formations and weapons capabilities," he said. "Then we'll determine how to engage." The Azerians looked at each other in confusion. "Engage? Your single vessel against the horde?" Greg laughed, a sound that made the aliens flinch. "This isn't our war fleet, Ambassador. This is just the greeting party. The real fleet is being assembled as we speak." As the Azerians left to return to their ship, Samantha stayed behind with Alan and the others. "Did you see how afraid they were of us?" she asked. "They called Earth a death world." "They haven't seen anything yet," Alan replied, studying the star charts showing the Vorex fleet positions. "Get me a secure channel to Earth. It's time to bring in the Marines." Back on their ship, Ambassador Zelnar looked at the human vessel through a viewing port. "What have we done?" he asked softly. "We have called death to fight death." His assistant put a hand on his shoulder. "Perhaps that is exactly what we needed." The Earth War fleet arrived 3 weeks later. 30 ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Azerian system. Each ship carried soldiers from multiple Earth nations, united for the first time against a common enemy. Admiral Nancy Foster stood on the bridge of the flagship Retribution. She was a short woman with gray hair cut close to her scalp, and eyes that missed nothing. She had commanded naval forces for 20 years, but never in space, and never against aliens. "Status report," she ordered as the fleet settled into formation. "All ships present and accounted for, Admiral," replied her communications officer. "No damage from the jump. The Azerian refugee ships are gathering at the gas giant as planned." Nancy nodded. "Signal Captain Powell. Tell him we're ready for the briefing." On the main screen, Alan Powell's face appeared. In the 3 weeks since first contact, his ship had gathered intelligence on the Vorex while the Earth fleet prepared for battle. The stress showed in the new lines on his face. "Admiral, welcome to the front lines," Alan said. "The Azerians are relieved to see you." What's the situation with the Vorex? Nancy asked, skipping pleasantries. They're moving faster than expected. Scout ships have already entered the system. The main fleet will arrive in 48 hours. Alan sent tactical data to the Retribution's computers. We've learned their ships are heavily armed but slow to maneuver. They rely on overwhelming force rather than strategy. The briefing continued for an hour. When it ended, Nancy turned to her officers. Deploy the fleet around the gas giant's 7 moons. I want fighter squadrons ready to launch and marine units prepared for possible ground combat. As the Earth ships moved into position, the Azirians watched with growing alarm. Ambassador Zelnar and his aides visited the Retribution at Nancy's invitation. They stood stiffly in their environmental suits, which protected them from the oxygen levels that humans found comfortable. Your vessels are positioned to attack, not defend, Zelnar observed, his large eyes blinking rapidly as he studied the tactical display. The Vorex fleet outnumbers yours 3-1. Numbers aren't everything, Ambassador, Nancy replied. Position and surprise matter more. And motivation, added Commander Ryan Diaz, who led the Marine forces. He was a tall man with dark eyes and a scar across his chin. Your people fight to survive. We fight because it's what we do best. The Azirians exchanged worried glances. In the weeks since meeting humans, they had been both grateful for their help and disturbed by their nature. They watched as human soldiers exercised in high-gravity chambers, practiced combat drills, and laughed about the coming battle. Your people seem eager for war, Zelnar said to Ryan as they walked through the ship. All around them, Marines checked weapons and adjusted body armor. It's what we're built for, Ryan replied, checking his rifle. For most of human history, we fought each other. Turns out we're pretty good at it. Zelnar stopped walking. You evolved on a world that tried to kill you every day. Your bodies adapted to survive extreme conditions. But your minds, they adapted to fight. Do your people know peace at all? Ryan considered this. We know the value of peace because we know the cost of war. That's why we're here. So your people don't have to learn that cost. Aboard the Vorex command ship, Supreme Commander Kraz received reports of the Earth fleet. The tall, reptilian alien had conquered 3 systems without serious resistance. His people were warriors bred for combat with natural armor and claws. They took what they wanted from weaker species. 30 ships? Kraz laughed, showing sharp teeth. The Azirians have found allies with more courage than sense. Who are these newcomers? Unknown, Supreme Commander, replied his second. They call themselves humans from a planet called Earth. We have no record of them. It doesn't matter, they will die like all who oppose the Horde. Kraz studied the tactical display. Their formation is unusual. They cluster around the moons instead of forming a defensive line. Perhaps they are unskilled in space combat. Or perhaps they have a strategy we don't yet understand. Kraz narrowed his yellow eyes. Approach with caution. Send scout ships. First, the Vorex scout vessels entered the gas giant's orbit 12 hours later. They moved carefully, scanning for traps. Human fighters remained hidden behind the moons, their engines cold. Lieutenant Kate Johnson sat in her fighter cockpit, breathing slowly to stay calm. She had flown combat missions on Earth, but never in space. Her squadron of 12 fighters was tucked into a crater on the 3rd moon waiting for orders. Remember your training, she said to her pilots over the comm. Space combat is about momentum and vectors. Use the moon's gravity to your advantage. Fighter Squadron Alpha, prepare to launch, came the order from the Retribution. Vorex scouts approaching your position. Copy that, Kate replied. Alpha Squadron, power up. Weapons hot. The fighters rose silently from the crater and skimmed along the moon's surface hidden from Vorex sensors. Kate checked her tactical display. 3 Vorex scout ships moved between the 3rd and 4th moons, passing through a narrow gap of intense gravitational forces. Now, Kate ordered. 12 Earth fighters shot out from behind the moon and accelerated through the gap behind the Vorex ships. The maneuver was considered suicidal due to the gravitational shear, but the human pilots had trained for weeks in simulators designed for exactly this scenario. Alpha leader to Retribution. Kate reported as her squadron emerged, behind the enemy. "We're in position. Enemy scouts are unaware." "Engage!" came the simple command from Admiral Foster. The human fighters opened fire. 2 Vorex scouts exploded before they could respond. The third turned to fight, but found itself caught between Kate's squadron and a second group of fighters emerging from the 4th moon. "First blood to us," Kate said as the last scout ship broke apart, returning to position. On the Retribution, Admiral Foster received the news with grim satisfaction. "The trap is set. Now we wait for them to spring it." The main Vorex fleet arrived 18 hours later. 90 warships, each 3 times the size of the largest Earth vessel. They moved in tight formation, their scanning systems searching for the human fleet. "They've detected our ships behind the moons," reported Nancy's tactical officer. "They're spreading out to surround the gas giant." "Good," Nancy said. "Let them think they have us trapped." She activated the fleet-wide channel. "All ships, prepare. For Phase 2, fighter squadrons launch on my mark." Around the 7 moons of the gas giant, Earth ships powered up their main engines. Fighter squadrons launched, hundreds of small craft pouring from carrier ships. The battle for the Azirian system had begun. On the colony world below, Azirian refugees watched the sky with fear and hope. The Vorex had already landed troops on the surface, forcing the locals to flee into the mountains. Now Earth Marines prepared to drop from orbit to engage those ground forces. Commander Ryan Diaz addressed his troops one last time before they boarded their landing craft. "This isn't our world," he told them. "These aren't our people. But today we fight for them as if they were. Show these Vorex what happens when they pick on someone who can fight back." The Marines cheered as they grabbed their gear. Overhead, the space battle erupted as Earth ships executed Admiral Foster's complex battle plan. The first major interstellar war involving humans had begun, and the galaxy was about to learn why Earth was classified as Deathworld 7. The space battle raged for 6 hours. Vorex ships fired powerful energy weapons that could tear through normal shields, but Earth vessels used a new defensive technology developed after studying the Azirian message. The shields bent rather than blocked, absorbing and redirecting energy. On the Retribution's bridge, Admiral Nancy Foster watched the tactical display with intense focus. Her plan was working. The Vorex fleet had split into smaller groups to surround the gas giant exactly as she had hoped. "Alpha Group reports success," her communications officer announced. 5 enemy ships disabled. "Beta Group has drawn heavy fire but remains operational," added her tactical officer. "The Vorex command ship is moving toward their position." Nancy nodded. "Signal Captain Murray. It's time for the pincer movement." The Earth fleet moved with practiced precision. Ships hidden behind different moons suddenly accelerated, using the gravitational pull to slingshot toward the enemy. The Vorex, expecting a defensive battle, found themselves caught in a complex trap. Lieutenant Kate Johnson led her fighter squadron through the chaos. Her small ships darted between larger vessels, targeting engines and weapons systems. 3 of her pilots had already been lost, but the remaining 9 followed her without question. "Command ship spotted," Kate reported, her voice steady despite the danger. "Heavy defenses, but we've found a weak point in their sensor array." "Can you exploit it?" asked the flight controller from the carrier. "Watch me," Kate replied. She led her fighters in a tight formation, approaching the massive Vorex command ship from below. They fired precisely at the sensor blind spot, creating an opening for a second squadron to deliver a more powerful strike. The command ship's engines flickered as systems failed. Inside the Vorex vessel, Supreme Commander Kraz roared in anger as alerts sounded. "How are they doing this? They're outnumbered." "Their tactics are unlike anything we've encountered," his second replied, clinging to a console as the ship shuddered. "They fight as if they expect to win despite the odds." "All ships focus fire on their flagship," Kraz ordered. "Cut off the head, and the body dies." 3 Vorex destroyers converged on the Retribution, firing their most powerful weapons. The Yao Earth flagship shook under the assault, but its shields held. "They're targeting us specifically," Nancy observed. "Good. Spring the trap." Hidden Earth vessels emerged from sensor shadows, surrounding the Vorex ships that had targeted the flagship. In the confusion, Kate's fighters slipped through the command ship's defenses and fired precisely at its propulsion systems. "We can't maneuver," Kraz's second reported panic in his voice. "And half the fleet can't receive our orders due to communication damage." For the first time in his life, Kraz felt fear. These humans, what are they? On the colony world below, the ground battle was equally intense. Vorex troops had established a stronghold in the main Azerian city, expecting little resistance. They were unprepared for human marines dropping from orbit in armored pods. Commander Ryan Diaz led the first wave, hitting the ground hard and immediately moving to secure a landing zone. The Vorex soldiers were larger than humans with natural armor and powerful weapons, but they fought as individuals rather than as coordinated units. "Keep formation," Ryan ordered as his Marines advanced through the city streets. "Use buildings for cover and watch for civilians." Sergeant Ben Russo and his squad pushed toward the colony center where Azerian hostages were held. Ben was younger than most of his team, but he moved with confidence born from years of training. When Vorex fire grazed his arm, he barely slowed. "Down. They're falling back," Ben radioed as his squad secured another block, pushing them from the colony center. The Vorex ground commander couldn't understand what was happening. His troops had superior strength and armor, yet the humans kept advancing despite injuries that would stop most species. When communications failed, the humans adapted instantly while his troops hesitated, waiting for orders. Ryan's forces surrounded the main Azerian administrative building by nightfall. Inside, Vorex troops held the colony governor and staff hostage. "We need to end this quickly," Ryan told his team leaders, "before they decide to eliminate the hostages." Ben studied the building plans an Azerian engineer had provided. "There's a maintenance tunnel under the east wing. My squad can enter there, while the main force creates a distraction at the front." Ryan nodded. "Do it." As night fell, the human forces launched a noisy assault on the building's main entrance. Vorex troops rushed to defend against what seemed like a full attack. Meanwhile, Ben and his squad slipped through the maintenance tunnel and emerged inside the building. They moved silently through service corridors, using thermal imaging to locate the hostages. When they found them, 20 Azerians huddled in a conference room guarded by 4 Vorex. Ben signaled his team to prepare. The rescue happened in seconds. Precise shots eliminated the guards before they could harm the hostages. As the last Vorex fell, the Azerian governor stared at the humans in shock. "You came for us," he said, his large eyes wide. "Even with the battle above, you came for us." "We don't leave people behind," Ben replied simply. "Can you walk? We need to move quickly." In orbit, the space battle reached its climax. The Vorex command ship, crippled by fighter attacks and surrounded by Earth vessels, could no longer coordinate. Its fleet, Supreme Commander Kraz faced a decision he had never expected to make. "Order a retreat," he finally commanded. "All ships to disengage and regroup at our home system." "Retreat?" his second questioned, shocked. "The Horde has never retreated." "The Horde has never faced humans before," Kraz replied, staring at the tactical display where Earth ships continued their relentless attack. "We will return with a larger force." The Vorex fleet began to withdraw, ships jumping to faster-than-light travel when they could break free of the battle. Some were too damaged to escape and were captured by Earth forces. Others fought to the end, refusing to accept defeat. On the Retribution's bridge, Admiral Foster watched the enemy retreat with grim satisfaction. "Signal all ships. Pursue but do not overextend. Priority is securing the colony world and protecting Azerian civilians." The battle had been won, but at a cost. 3 Earth ships had been destroyed, with 12 more damaged. Hundreds of fighters and Marines had been lost. Yet compared to what military analysts had predicted, the casualties were remarkably low. Ambassador Zelnar joined Nancy on the bridge, his environmental suit marking him as different from the humans around him. He watched the tactical display, in silence for several minutes. "You knew you would win," he finally said. "Even against a larger force with more advanced weapons." Nancy turned to him. "We plan for victory, Ambassador, always." The Vorex will return, Zelnar warned. They have never accepted defeat before. Neither have we, Nancy replied. The difference is, we know how to learn from every battle. Do they? As the Earth fleet secured the system, medical ships arrived to treat the wounded of all species. Engineering vessels began repairing Azerian infrastructure damaged in the fighting, and deep space sensors watched for any sign of the Vorex return. On the colony world, Ryan's Marines helped Azerian families return to their homes. Children who had hidden in fear now watched the humans with curiosity and gratitude. Some even approached the soldiers offering local fruits as thanks. They're calling you heroes, an Azerian official told Ryan as they surveyed the city. Stories are already spreading to other systems about the humans who came from a death world to save us. Ryan watched his troops helping rebuild a collapsed school. We're not heroes, he said. We're just doing what humans have always done, surviving and helping others survive too. The official studied him. Perhaps that is exactly what makes you heroes to us. The Vorex returned 3 months later, not with a larger fleet as expected, but with their entire armada. 200 warships jumped into the Azerian system, led by a massive dreadnought twice the size of any vessel seen before. Earth had used those 3 months wisely. Admiral Nancy Foster had established a permanent defense force around the Azerian homeworld. New bases on the 7 moons allowed for better monitoring of space. And most importantly, human engineers had worked with Azerian scientists to develop new weapons and defenses based on both species' technologies. They're here, announced the Retribution sensor officer as alarms sounded throughout the ship. Multiple signatures, far more than before. Nancy studied the tactical display, her face calm despite the odds. Send word to Earth. The Vorex have committed their full strength. She turned to her officers. Battle stations deploy according to Plan Delta. The Earth fleet now consisted of 45 ships, joined by 15 Azerian vessels modified for combat. Still outnumbered, but Nancy had never planned to fight fairly. On the massive Vorex dreadnought, Supreme Commander Kraz addressed his war council. His scales had dulled from stress in the months since their defeat, but his eyes burned with determination. Humans have had time to prepare, he told his officers. But so have we. We have studied their tactics and adapted our own. Today we crush this upstart species and take what is ours. His second officer, newly promoted after the previous ones, execution for failure, bowed low. The Horde will prevail, Supreme Commander. This time we target their ground forces first, Kraz ordered. Land troops before engaging their fleet. Cut off their Marines on the surface, then destroy their ships when they try to provide support. The Vorex fleet split into attack groups, with troop carriers protected by escort vessels heading toward the colony world. They expected the human fleet to rush to intercept, spreading themselves thin in the process. Instead, Nancy ordered her ships to hold position. Let them land troops, she instructed. Commander Diaz is waiting for them. On the colony world, Ryan Diaz and his Marines had spent months training the Azerians to defend themselves. Though naturally peaceful, the Azerians proved quick learners when properly motivated. They would never match humans in combat, but they had other strengths to contribute. They're coming, Ryan told his officers as they gathered in the underground command center. 5 carrier ships, at least 10,000 troops. They'll land at these points. He highlighted locations on the map. Sergeant Ben Russo, now a lieutenant, after his actions in the first battle, studied the landing zones. They're avoiding the city centers this time, smart, but predictable, Ryan replied. They're landing where they think we're weakest. He smiled grimly. Exactly where we've prepared. The biggest surprises. The Vorex landing ships descended through the atmosphere, their sensors showing minimal resistance. Ground troops deployed quickly, advancing through forests and fields toward Azerian settlements. They moved with caution, expecting human ambushes. What they didn't expect were the traps created by Azerian engineers using their knowledge of the local environment. The peaceful aliens had turned their understanding of biology and chemistry into effective defensive weapons. Entire fields of native plants released paralyzing spores when disturbed. Water sources near landing zones had been seeded with microscopic, organisms that caused Vorex equipment to malfunction. Communications were disrupted by devices that mimicked natural phenomena the Vorex scanners ignored. Half their ground forces are stalled or lost, Ben reported as he monitored the situation from a forward position. They can't coordinate between landing zones. Now we engage, Ryan ordered. Human and Azerian fighters emerged from hidden bunkers and natural caves. They didn't match the Vorex in strength, but they didn't need to. Precision strikes against confused enemy units proved devastatingly effective. In orbit, the space battle unfolded differently than the first engagement. The Vorex had adapted, their tactics using smaller ships to counter human fighter squadrons and concentrating fire to overwhelm shield systems. Lieutenant Kate Johnson found her squadron facing new enemy fighters with better maneuverability. 3 of her pilots were lost in the first exchange. They've learned, she told her remaining squad. Switch to pattern Omega. Use the moon's gravity wells. Kate led her fighters into the narrow gap between the 3rd and 4th moons, the same dangerous route they had used before. But this time Vorex fighters followed. They're tracking us through the gap, reported one of her pilots. They've adapted to the gravitational shear. Kate smiled inside her helmet. Good. That's exactly what we wanted. As both groups of fighters emerged from the gap, the humans suddenly cut engines and rotated, facing the pursuing Vorex. Behind the enemy fighters, hidden in a crater on the 4th moon, a battery of railguns powered up and fired. Caught between the human fighters and the moon-based weapons, the Vorex squadron was destroyed in seconds. Pattern Omega successful, Kate reported to the Retribution. Enemy has adapted to our old tactics but fallen for our new ones. Throughout the system, similar scenarios played out. The Vorex had studied human tactics from the first battle, but humans had anticipated this and developed completely new approaches. When the Vorex expected aggression, humans showed patience. When they prepared for defense, humans attacked. On the Retribution, Nancy watched as the battle unfolded according to plan. The dreadnought is holding position, directing rather than engaging, she observed. Target their communication relays first, then move to Phase 2. Earth ships coordinated their attacks with precision that the Vorex couldn't match. Small, fast vessels darted between larger warships, disrupting formations and drawing fire away from vulnerable allies. Fighter squadrons targeted specific systems rather than trying to destroy entire ships. From his command center on the dreadnought, Kraz watched in growing alarm as his carefully planned assault fell apart. How are they doing this? We studied their previous tactics. They're not using the same tactics, his second replied, checking reports from across the battlefield. Every strategy is new. It's as if they anticipated our counters and developed responses in advance. Kraz slammed, his clawed hand against the console. All ships focus on their flagship. If we destroy their admiral, they will falter. The dreadnought finally moved into battle position, its massive weapons powering up. A dozen Vorex warships formed a protective screen around it as it approached the Retribution. Nancy had been waiting for this moment. Now, she ordered. Throughout the gas giant's ring system, hidden installations activated. Not weapons, but enormous gravity generators developed by Azerian scientists and built by human engineers. They created a localized distortion that affected the Vorex ship's drive systems without harming the human vessels, which had been modified to compensate. The dreadnought slowed to a crawl, its escorts drifting out of formation as their engines fought against the gravitational interference. Left vulnerable, they faced the full force of the Earth fleet's attack. All ships, engage at will, Nancy commanded. Fighters, target their weapon systems. On the colony surface, the ground battle turned decisively in favor of the human Azerian forces. Ryan led the final push against the main Vorex landing zone, where the alien troops had gathered in a defensive position. They're trapped and they know it, Ben told Ryan as they observed enemy movements. No reinforcements, no air support, and their equipment is failing due to the Azerian bioagents. Ryan nodded. Offer them surrender terms. No need for further bloodshed. The Vorex ground commander stared in disbelief at the human officer who approached under a flag of truce. The concept of surrender was foreign to the Horde, yet his troops were surrounded, their weapons malfunctioning, and strange ailments were spreading through the ranks from the local environment. For the first time in Vorax history, a field commander surrendered his forces. 6 months after the Battle of the Seven Moons, representatives from 17 alien species gathered on the neutral space station Harmony. They came to witness a historic event, the signing of the Terran Protection Accord. The large, circular, meeting chamber had been designed to accommodate beings of all sizes and environmental needs. In the center stood a simple table with the document that would change the course of galactic history. Ambassador Samantha Wright represented Earth. In the months since first contact, she had worked tirelessly to build relationships with other civilizations. Today she wore a formal blue uniform with silver trim, simple by the standards of most alien diplomats but impressive in its clean lines. "This is a momentous day," she said, addressing the gathered representatives. "Not just for humanity, but for all peaceful species who wish to explore the stars without fear." Beside her stood Ambassador Zelnar, now the head of the Azerian diplomatic corps. His once fearful attitude toward humans had transformed into deep respect. "When we sent our desperate message into space," Zelnar told the assembly, "we had no idea we were calling upon the most dangerous species in the quadrant." He paused, his large eyes scanning the room. "And the most honorable. The Terran Protection Accord named Earth as the official military defender of 6 vulnerable civilizations, including the Azerians. In return, these species would share their scientific and cultural knowledge with humanity. Earthships would patrol their space lanes and Earth Marines would train their defense forces." One by one, the representatives approached the table to sign. Some moved on multiple legs. Others floated in anti-gravity fields. All regarded the humans present with a mixture of respect and caution. Supreme Commander Kraz observed the ceremony from a separate room. After the defeat of the Vorax Armada, he had been captured rather than killed, an experience that challenged everything he believed about warfare. Now he served as a reluctant witness to the peace process, his clawed hands bound by energy restraints. "I still don't understand," he said to his guard, Lieutenant Ben Russo. "You could have destroyed our forces completely. Why offer peace terms?" Ben, who had been assigned to guard the Vorax leader due to his combat record, considered the question. "Destroying your people wouldn't make the galaxy safer. Changing your people might. And you think this accord will change us?" Kraz asked, gesturing toward the screen showing the ceremony. "It already has," Ben replied. "You're the first Vorax in history to survive defeat. Your people are listening to your reports about humans. They're learning there are alternatives to endless conquest." After the ceremony, a reception allowed the various species to mingle less formally. Captain Alan Powell, now Admiral Powell after his promotion, found himself speaking with a group of diplomats from worlds he had never heard of 6 months ago. "Is it true that humans can survive in almost any environment?" asked a small, furry representative from a low-gravity world. Alan smiled. "Not any environment, but we're adaptable. We evolved on a planet with wildly different climates and conditions. We had to adapt just to survive our own world." "And each other," added another diplomat, this one tall and crystalline in structure. "Our historians have studied your broadcasts. Your species spent most of its history fighting itself." "True," Alan acknowledged. "We're not proud of that history, but we've learned from it. And now we can use those hard-learned lessons to protect others." Across the room, Dr. Greg Martinez was deep in conversation with scientists from 3 different worlds. The xenobiologist had become a celebrity among alien researchers for his work, combining human and Azerian medical knowledge to treat the wounded after the battles. The key breakthrough was understanding how different species perceive pain, Greg explained, using his hands to illustrate as he spoke. "Humans evolved to ignore pain when survival requires it. That's why our Marines can keep fighting despite injuries that would incapacitate other species." "A useful trait for warriors," observed an Azerian scientist, "but potentially dangerous in a peaceful galaxy." Greg nodded. "Which is why this accord is so important. It gives humanity a purpose that uses our strengths without letting them define us." On the observation deck of Harmony Station, Admiral Nancy Foster stood beside Ambassador Zelnar, watching Earth ships patrol the space lanes that had once been threatened by the Vorex. The sleek vessels moved in precise formation, a visible symbol of the new order. 6 months ago, most of these species had never heard of humans, Nancy said. Now they look to us for protection. Does that responsibility concern you? Zelnar asked. Many of our historians worry that defending others might eventually lead to controlling them. Nancy considered this. The risk is real, she admitted. Power can corrupt any species. But I believe in humanity's better nature. We fought so hard throughout our history because we cared so deeply about protecting what we love. We still don't fully understand you, Zelnar said. Your people celebrate your victories with joy, yet you treat our wounded alongside your own. You fight with terrifying efficiency, yet you offer peace to defeated enemies. Humanity is full of contradictions, Samantha Wright said, joining them at the viewport. We're capable of terrible violence, but also incredible compassion. Perhaps that's what makes us different from the Vorex. We fight because we must, not because we desire to. As they spoke, a human medical ship docked at the station, bringing supplies and personnel to treat refugees from worlds the Vorex had attacked before Earth's intervention. The ship's name was painted on its hull, HMHS Mercy. The galaxy is learning what it means to have humans as allies, Zelnar said. Though I admit many species now fear awakening your anger as much as they feared the Vorex. Samantha laughed. Just remember, we're always happier building than destroying. Call us for help and we'll come. But it's better for everyone if you don't make us fight. In the years that followed, humanity's influence spread throughout known space. Earth's universities became centers for interspecies education, where the brightest minds from 100 worlds shared knowledge and culture. Earth's shipyards built vessels designed for exploration and science alongside those made for defense. The Vorex, their leadership structure reformed under the watchful eyes of human advisors, slowly transformed from conquerors to traitors. It would take generations to change their culture completely, but the process had begun. On the day the last Vorex prison ship returned to its homeworld, carrying former warriors now educated in alternative ways of life, Supreme Commander Kraz, now simply Citizen Kraz, stood beside Ben Russo on the landing pad. Your species are still dangerous, Kraz observed. Perhaps more dangerous than we ever were because you hide it better. Ben smiled. We're dangerous when we need to be. The difference is we don't want to need to be. Kraz looked at the human. The old texts from conquered worlds often spoke of hope arriving in times of darkness. None of us understood what that meant until your ships appeared. As the former enemies watched the prisoners disembark to begin their new lives, a new saying was spreading throughout the galaxy, whispered among threatened peoples on distant worlds. When darkness comes, call for the light of Earth.